Hello, everybody, and welcome to Flow Live episode 5. I'm hopeful that many of you have been to our previous episodes and you'll enjoy today's as much as any of the others that we've had before. My name is Stephen Walters, Solution Architect. Let me start by thanking Tim for some banging tunes there. Thank you, Tim. That was great. Today, our very special guest is going to be Scott Hemmings from Telefonica. I'm really excited to hear this. I've had a little sneak peek. This is some really good stuff. And I've had the fortune of working with Scott recently. Scott, are you there? Can you hear me?
Morning or afternoon. How are we all doing?
Hi, Scott. So everybody, please just ping in. Audience, ping in, get in there on the chat. Somewhere down there, you'll find a little box that says chat. Tell us where it is that you're calling in from. Scott, where are you calling in from?
So I'm from Yorkshire today, Stephen, in the middle of the UK.
Oh,
and they say
God's great country, as they say. I love it there. I went to university around there. I went to Huddersfield. Fantastic place, absolutely beautiful. So you're in the right place for a lockdown then. It's been good for you?
Lovely, yeah. We lived a couple of minutes away from a river and canal, so that's been our saving grace, really. Just walks down there and on the bike.
Good, excellent. And we're getting quite a few people in from you. We got from London and Colchester. We've got people from California, Iowa. Okay, Owensboro. Oh, very nice. New Jersey as well. So all around the world, from both Europe and from the US. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. We're really great that you can. So I want to just make some brief comments before I hand over to Scott. We want to get on with what we want to talk about today. Down there in the little box area where there was the chat, there's also a Q&A button. Please make use of it. Click on that Q&A button. Any questions that you've got, please just type them out on there and we'll put those questions to Scott. So you've got that opportunity within there. Also, if we don't get around to answering your questions in there, please go to the Flow channel. Go to the Ask the Expert, hashtag Ask the Expert channel. And in there, you'll be able to speak with Scott. I know Scott has already been lively on there, so please do take that opportunity. A brief introduction from myself into Scott. So Scott is a senior network manager for Telefonica, where he leads the NOCs and the network customer experience teams. He spent 10 years managing major incidents and improving service operations and holds ITIL and BCS qualifications. Outside of work, Scott is a keen poker player, so don't try to bluff him, and regularly travels to Las Vegas to hone his skills. As I say, I've had the opportunity over the last few days to have conversations with Scott and discuss with him about what's going on at Telefonica. We've built up a great relationship together, X Matters and Telefonica. More of this is going to come now from Scott. So, Scott, excited to hear from you. Over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us. I love this opportunity to talk to you about some of the stuff that we've been up to at Telefonica with X Matters. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about a program of work we did a couple of years ago to transform how we used X Matters to improve things for our major incident managers and also for our colleagues as well. So we wanted to make things faster for our major incident managers to get comms out the door. We wanted to make sure that those comms were clearer so that they had pre-defaulted messaging in there, which was a little bit improved. And we also wanted to get closer to our customers. So a lot of our users don't necessarily use email or SMS. They're in our store networks. So we wanted to see how we could use different tools like Workplace by Facebook to reach those colleagues as well. So I'm going to touch a little bit about some of that stuff. So first of all, I just want to tell you a little bit about me. So I'm married, got 2 children, the oldest of which is now 16. So a 16-year-old girl is not a good thing for me. Outside of work, as Stephen said, I love to play poker. So we try to go to Vegas, or I try to go to Vegas a couple of times a year. I just had my flights cancelled for July, unfortunately. So just rebooked to go May next year. In terms of my career, it's been quite interesting, really. So I started off very young, went in the army, moved into sales and customer operations, really enjoyed that. And then one day a guy came up to me and said, how about coming across to be a small fish in the big pond of IT? And I thought, great. And that was when I was at Skybet. So Skybet were just going through an agile transformation. It was about 7 years ago now. So it was right at the beginning of DevOps, and it was really interesting time to learn about how operations worked in a DevOps environment. And it was also good. They were following the Spotify kind of model of having tribes and guilds. So it was really interesting, really great insight. Then moved on to Telefonica, and they were just in their IT private cloud and then public cloud transformation. So again, it was about how we took monitoring and alerting at scale, really. Largest company in the world. Any downtime on their website was about $1 million a minute in revenue loss at the time. So very, very intense. And from there, I went to lead a team at Npower and looking at the UK's largest transformation project, so infrastructure project, and that was the smart metering project. So for those not in the UK, we're putting smart gas and electric meters in everybody's homes so that they communicate automatically all their meter readings back, and it can help the government predict usage. We can reduce costs of that electricity and gas, and it also allows users to see how much they're spending so they can try and reduce their consumption. And then I got a call from the old head of incident management at O2, Telefonica, and asked if I'd like to join them, and I thought, what a great time. So been with Telefonica since 2017. I recently moved into their network operations team from the major incident team, and that's where I am now, helping drive some of the improvements in the networks teams. So a little bit more about Telefonica and what we do and where we are worldwide. So we actually operate in 14 countries. We have a presence in 10 others around the world. So we're present with several brands. So Movistar is our brand that runs across South America and Spain, so Argentina, Colombia, Chile. We've then got Vivo, which is our brand in Brazil. And then we've got O2, which operates in Europe, Germany and Spain, so in the UK. Now, across those countries, we've got about 120,000 employees and a turnover of just under 49 billion euros a year. Within O2 itself, we have around 6,700 employees, and we've got 450 retail stores. And we're known in the UK for sponsoring the England Rugby Union team, the O2 Arena, which used to be the Millennium Dome, and also several music academies across the country. So there's 19 O2 academies that we sponsor. So what I'm going to do is just use a bit of an analogy to try and relate what I think about poker and how that relates to what we do in the world of major incident management. So for those that have never played poker before, when we have a poker tournament, we start off with a certain number of chips in the tournament. And as that tournament progresses, the decisions that you make get more and more complex and tougher to make. The opponents, all the easy opponents have gone out in the early stages, so it tends to be a lot difficult. And normally what happens is about 10 to 15% of the players that buy into a tournament usually win some money. And those at the bottom end of that might get just what they pay to enter, but those at the top can get anywhere up to 200, 300, 400 times what they pay, depending on the size of the tournament. And where I think that relates to major incident management is, you'll know from dealing with incidents yourself, the longer that an incident has been going on, the more pressure that you're under to get that incident resolved. And the decisions that you make 2-3 hours into an incident really can have huge ramifications. And I think that's very similar in poker. If you make the wrong decision, you lose all the chips and you're out of the game. I also think there's a lot of strategy involved in poker and understanding the people and the stakeholders around the table. And I think that's very much like a major incident. How we communicate with certain technical people and technical managers can really differ depending on who they are on the call. And I think if you know how to handle certain people, it really helps you in a major incident. And that's just the same at poker. If you know and you've played with someone before, so you know how they may act, it makes it easier to make your decisions. And like I said, the pressure. We've all been on those major incidents that have been going on for a while, and even though you're doing everything perfect, things still aren't getting better because an and actually didn't have the expected outcome. Poker's just the same. You know, you could do everything perfect but become unlucky by the turn of the next card. It also teaches us to learn from our mistakes. So I think reflection is a big thing for me. I reflect often, and in poker you certainly need to look back at the way that you played your game and make changes for the next game that you play. And we do that with every major incident. We look back at what we could learn from that incident. How can we improve the next time? So that's similarities for me. So moving on then, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the problem that we found ourselves in and how we came to overcome it. So at the time, our head of major incident management, George, had developed text matters. They'd put in some great time-saving processes in there and communications. And he was very involved from the very beginning about how we developed and used it. But unfortunately, he was the lead and not many other people in the team knew what was happening. And George got a lovely promotion and was moving on. So we had to figure out how we could support the tool and the product going forward without his expertise. So that's where I came in. I asked if I could get involved, and we started a project to look at that with one of our apprentices, Raj. So the first thing we did the first problem that we had when we started looking after the tool was there was a spelling mistake in one of our JavaScript flows. So we had to understand where that error was and how to correct it. And so I loaded up the Xmatters help pages on their tutorials and tried to understand where the JavaScript was for a start, because we'd never looked. Quickly did some tutorials, figured that out, and we downloaded our JavaScript into Notepad so that we could view it a little bit easier. And what we found is there were 4,500 lines of JavaScript. Now, I've never used JavaScript before. I've done a little bit of macro in Excel, but never anything with any of the web-based languages. So we had to kind of figure it out. And so Raj and I sat down, looked at the code, realized where this mistake was, just searched for it, and were able to replace it and upload it. But what it did make us ask is, how are we going to do this if we have something that breaks that we can't fix because we don't understand how that code is working? So we decided that there was a few options really for us to be able to do that. The first thing was that there were 7 different communication plans or workflows, as they're now known. And so that meant that major incident managers had to decide, first of all, which communication plan to use. And then the JavaScript code then did some stuff to decide where to send that communication, or if there are certain priorities, whether we'd send a text or just an app notification or an email. So we decided that we needed to really break it down and get on top of it. So we had 3 real options at that stage. One was to pay an outsourced partner to support that code for us and to do any developments. The second one was to pay Xmatters for some development time and try and use some of that for support. And the third option was to just learn it and do it ourselves. And we thought that option 2 and 3 as a combination was probably best. The cost was quite prohibitive for our option 1, for our outsourced provider. And although we wanted Xmatters to help us develop some of the ideas and tools that we had, we didn't want them to rely on them for changes to that in the future. So we really wanted to understand exactly what code was being developed so that we could look after it and change it should we need to in the future. And we also had 3 kind of use cases, things that we wanted to build going forward. So what we started to do is map out the 7 different workflows that were there already, and found that because of some changes that Xmatters had made throughout the years that we've been using it, and with removing some of this JavaScript and using subscriptions and Flow Designer, we could get it down to 1 workflow, and it'd be much easier for our major incident managers just to go in and click and get to the tools that they needed to. So in terms of the changes that we wanted to make then, we wanted to introduce Workplace by Facebook as a messaging tool. So as I mentioned earlier, Workplace is available across our entire estate, so both our retail estate, our head offices. And what we found is that teams in our stores were really engaged with it, and it very quickly became our primary tool for internal communications. So we've got SLT members doing videos on there and live Q&As now. We've got all of our internal comms are posted there. over the internet. So we wanted to use that so that we could tell people that major incidents were occurring and get to places that don't normally find out that they'd had an issue. The second thing we wanted to do is leverage Microsoft Teams. So Teams have just replaced Skype for Business as our primary go-to collaboration tool. So we wanted to understand how we could use Teams to get communications out there again to the people that used it. And then the third thing that we wanted to do is start using XMatters to leverage some of its other capabilities, such as being able to call out support teams. So we wanted to make sure to do a trial of that and make sure that it worked as we'd like. So the next thing we did was start looking at the workflows and Flow Designer to see what we could do. So the first thing that we did was start building these workflows. We did a workplace group on there. So we did a workplace flow in Flow Designer where we posted to a specific group. We then did a workplace chat integration where we just started to post into an app, and it's a little bit like Messenger would be for Facebook. And we also built one that was going to be for just Microsoft Teams specifically. We also then, to go into a little bit more detail, with the workplace integration. So as you can see, the style of the communications kind of matches throughout all of our tool sets, which is one of the great things about XMatters. So the app notification, the web-based notification, and then when we go and look at some of the other tools, all look exactly the same. When we do send a chat message to our users, they're able to just see it immediately in a pop-up notification. So they're getting notifications on their devices through push notifications. And it has allowed us to increase the reach of comms by about 600 to 700 users are now receiving them through Workplace that historically wouldn't have got our comms. We've also found that we've been able to decrease the number of licenses that we needed within XMatters for the broadcast messages and repurpose those so that we can use them for our other use cases like the on-call things that we talked about earlier. So just to look at the teams in a little bit more detail. So, like I said, we use Teams across the entire Telefonica group as our primary collaboration tool. We wanted to have channels that we could have users go and subscribe to and receive instant notifications of our communications. As you can see from the slightly moderated message up on the screen, they look very, very similar to the Workplace by Facebook posts. All the content is exactly the same. We also allowed then people to start asking messages of us and start typing back to the major incident team to ask for updates on what was happening or if they had specific questions. And this works really, really well alongside Workplace, which was kind of just a broadcast tool. The final thing, like I said, that we wanted to do was look at how we could use the on-call functionality from XMatters. So in my new team as network managers, we decided that we'd be the guinea pigs and we built an integration to be able to do that. So what we did, just a very quick one, a small group with 4 people on there. We had escalation points so that we could auto-escalate when people didn't answer. We've got multiple devices. So because we run on the O2 phone network, if that network ever has any problems, we have other devices that roam onto other networks. And by using this functionality in the groups, we could automatically call out those numbers without our major incident managers having to do anything. So they could literally just engage our network management team just by the push of a button to say call us out. We found in the initial trial that we're seeing much better collaboration in terms of the time that it takes for us to respond to a message. We know who's called us out because we get a text message and an app notification to say who the major incident manager was that's dealing with the incident. So it allows us to get in touch with them really quick when we sign on. And we can then report back on how many times we've been called out, how long it took us to respond, and which devices have been notified. So it's been a real success in the early stages. What we're going to do now is I'm just going to hand over to XMatters to play you a quick video that just shows about one of the key integrations that we had to make or changes to our workflows to make it work for us.
Let's have a quick look at how we can use XMatters to send out a message which has content that differs based on some of the properties of the form that we're completing, and then how we can also have that same notification be posted out to another application such as a Microsoft Teams channel. Here on the screen, I've got a very simple stakeholder form that's got some key properties that you would expect in this type of notification. So an incident identifier, some classification properties about the update that we're sending out, and then more importantly, the key information that we want to send to our key users or our key stakeholders. Now you'll notice we've got two properties here regarding brand and the type of notification that we're sending. So let's say, for example, we want to first of all send a notification out to the Movistar group. We can select that property, and we can also select the type of notification. So we might say this is going to be an initial communication. Now, if we hit send message on that, you'll notice first of all that we're not directly targeting any recipients, purely because we're using subscriptions within XMatters to automatically determine, based on the brand selected, who receives that notification. Now over here in the XMatters mobile app, you can see I've had the notification come through. We've got the Movistar logo in there, and the header bar in the middle there is in a red color because we selected an initial style update. If we go back into our incident form, let's say this time we actually want to send out a notification to the O2 group, but we want to update them with regards to another issue that's going on, maybe something with regards to 3G. Again, we can hit send message, and this time the notification that comes through will look slightly different in that it will have a different logo and a different color header bar. So here we go, we've got a different color, different logo and a different color of the bar because we selected the update property as the notification type. And that's all done within the message editor within XMatters. So if we come into the messages layout and go into the HTML editor, we're simply using CSS or style sheets to basically change the layout of the message. So here we've got the head row, which was the bar in the middle, and you can see it has a property for initial, update and resolved, whereby it will change to either green, orange or red depending on the property that's selected for update type. And so by using inline CSS formatting and the property UUID from the form property, you can then simply change that particular class and have the message content change accordingly. Similarly with logos, because we had that brand as a property, we can then simply have a static URL that changes based on the property we select to pick out a different logo from a hosting site. So in this case, we're storing it on our Google GCP instance. So all of those logos are stored there and are automatically picked depending on the property in the form that we select. And in terms of those notifications that went out through XMatters, through text, email, app and put email voice notification, we can also at the same time push that information out to other tools such as Microsoft Teams. So here we had a much lighter version of the message go out in that we just had the core update, the instant number, and then the type of update and brand that we've sent that to. And the Movistar one that we sent out at the beginning has gone into a completely separate channel because we've routed it according to the brand that was selected within the property. And that routing can all be set up within XMatters Flow Designer. So here we have a simple switch logic statement that says, look at the brand property of the update that's being sent out, and then route it to a different Teams channel connector depending on the property that's selected, and then also send the notification out via XMatters as well. So nice and simple, ability to change the direction or the routing of any notifications off to other tools and into specific channels depending on property values, and also the ability to change the look and feel of messages and the logos that are used, the color schemes that are used based on properties and inline style formatting.
So that shows one of the ways that we were able to cut down our number of communication plans, our workflows, because we could change the priorities definitions that had different header images by using that example there. It meant that we could just make them really, really simple on the input form by having a priority drop down rather than needing different workflows per priority level. So it was really handy for us. So the next part of our puzzle then was to figure out how we could use subscriptions to send our communications to specific groups of people, but also to different devices based upon inputs on the actual form that the major incident managers were filling in. So what we wanted to do is for a P1, what we class as a critical priority incident in Telefonica, we wanted to be able to send SMS, in-app notifications and emails to our customers. But for a P2, a high priority incident, we only wanted to be able to send the emails and the in-app notifications. So we used subscriptions to have a rule that said for a CPI, a P1, then send an SMS. We then had a separate subscription that says for a high priority, send only an email and an in-app notification. And then a third one that said if it's critical, also send an email and an in-app notification. And those logic steps in the subscriptions allowed us to be able to really simplify the forms. It also allowed us to have some complex group names that we didn't show to our major incident managers. So for example, if you've got users across multiple countries, multiple teams, and you've got quite a complex naming convention for your groups, you don't necessarily want to show that level of complexity to your major incident managers. So we might just say we want to have a data group rather than have a UK O2 data group that only sends it about 3G. So we use subscriptions to say if we get the input from the major incident manager of data group, we then have a subscription that understands data group means send it to this group of users or this group with a more complex naming structure. And it just really simplified it for us in the input screens. So what have we learned throughout the process? I think we learned a lot. So for a start, that JavaScript is really, really complicated. And if you move a colon or a squiggly bracket, then and you didn't mean to, it's going to cause you a lot of pain. But one of the things that we did like was in terms of on our workflows, we really mapped out what each workflow was doing in advance, and that made it really simple when we came to recreate the new plans. We also decided that it was going to be a good idea to really engage with the teams where we were changing the tool so that they knew why we were changing it. And it really made it easy then that when we came to them to say, actually, we're going to change the format of this messaging slightly, they knew why we were doing it because they'd been engaged early, and that made it really easy to get buy-in, and we got no pushback. But the third thing that we found was that a lot of the code that was in our JavaScript had actually now been replaced by Xmatters in the tool. So we've got a really good working relationship with our customer success managers at Xmatters. We sync in every couple of months. Any new ideas, we push them through in enhancement requests. And what we found is by doing that, we'd got a lot of the functionality, like, for example, having times in BST. They never existed before. Because they now exist, we could remove the code that was translating all of our dates and times to the relevant time zone. So that's made it really, really easy for us when we came to do it. We removed loads of code that just wasn't required anymore. The fourth thing that we learned was always use your non-prod development environment. When we took over the responsibility for the tool, a lot of the code had been developed in the live environment because they were just building it as they needed it at the beginning. What we did is we scrapped our development environment and ripped it all to pieces. We then exported every single flow that we had in the live environment and imported them into our non-production environment. And that meant that we could change them and rip them to pieces. It also now means because everything's version controlled, it's really easy for us to add a step to a flow and then promote that into our production environment. So definitely recommend that you do that if you've not already. We'll then talk about some of the business benefits and the results that we've found since we've made all of these improvements. So the number of workflows being reduced from 7 to 1 has made it really simple for our major incident managers. It means that the quality of the communications that we're sending are a lot better. They're a lot less likely to make mistakes because they've only got one form to fill in that's the same every single time, rather than different forms and different scenarios each time. We've also got the benefits of the new tools. So like I said, we've been able to reach 600 to 800 new users by using Workplace by Facebook. And by doing that within Flow Designer, we've got these tiny little steps that are there so that we can we can add new features really easily. It's just one extra step on the flow rather than having to figure out where in the 4,500 lines of JavaScript we'd need to remove old code and add new code in. We've also found the customer experience is a little bit better. So historically, we couldn't upgrade or downgrade an incident in our communications because of the way that our workflows worked. You remember me saying earlier that we send a text message out for a critical incident, a P1, but not for P2s. So when we downgraded an incident, historically, we just went to the P2 workflow and sent out a new set of comms, but we didn't close the loop on the text messaging. So what we've been able to do now is by using subscriptions, all that is automated for us. So as soon as we change it, it recognizes that we had an event that was a critical incident and then sends out the relevant comms to close the loop. The trial that we've done with our calling out support teams is still in its early phases. We've been about 2 months into that now. From a user of that to be called out, we found it really, really good. What we need to do now is try and get more teams involved in that, so our major incident team just have one tool to go to. Because at the moment, they're using Xmatters to engage our teams and their normal call-out methods for the other teams. So what we want to do is try and get as many people as we can into Xmatters to reduce that complexity. And then the final bit that we did was the cost savings in the support method. We are now able to support our own instance of Xmatters wholly, so bar any code or infrastructure issues Xmatters have. But from our code, we understand it, and there's multiple users that understand it, and so we're not a single point of failure anymore. And making any changes are a lot easier, like I said earlier, with just adding a step in to a flow. So that's everything from me around what we've done so far. To tell you a little bit about what we've got in the pipeline now. So there's a couple of things we're doing. Like I said, we want to be able to call out support teams quicker and more of them. We also are moving to a private cloud, which will use more agile development. So we are learning about how we can change and use our tooling more to make that easier for us. So for example, we want to be able to trigger recovery actions from Xmatters rather than needing somebody to sign in to say, restart a server or roll back a deployment. We want to automate that right at the beginning. So that's what we're currently working on and will be for the next few months. Okay, so that takes me on to the Q&A section. So Stephen, I can see we've had some chats, but I've not managed to read them as I've been going through. Do you want to help?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've had some questions through, so please, if you're prepared and ready, we'll discuss these. So one that came through from John, and I know that you discussed this somewhat when you were talking about the subscriptions and you were talking about Flow Designer, and he was asking about how we target other devices. Now, specifically in that, he knows that we can target SMS, voice, email, and through the app for any engagements. But it's how do you target into other tools such as MS Teams, Slack, and so on? That's with the Flow Designer, yes?
Yeah, that's right. So within Flow Designer, you'd have a switch. Now, you may need to put in your code whether you want to do those things. So you may do it like we do, where we say for every single priority one, we will send an SMS. So we know that's built into our subscription. If you want to have logic where you may change that dependent upon scenarios on form, you can do that in Flow Designer. So add a switch, and the outcome of that would be to post to a channel. And if it's a different option, then it wouldn't do that. And you can do that for all of the different integrations.
Just a little bit more information on that, John, in terms of within Flow Designer itself. As you saw in the demonstration, you saw the boxes for the MS Teams. There are equivalent capabilities in there for tools such as Slack and so on, where you can have those interactions, you can post out to those channels, you can send those notifications. Those are things that are available built in within Flow Designer and built in within the Xmatters tooling capability. A good question here from Thomas. Have you investigated integration with alerting tools, and is this possible?
So we are currently doing that at the moment, actually. So I had a kickoff call with the monitoring teams yesterday to start some piece of work on that. So part of my new role is going to be about how we do that with our IT private cloud. And so, yes, you 100% can take any feed that can be triggered by an email or a web request, can be ingested into Xmatters, and then you can choose what you do with it. So there's alert aggregation stuff in there, there's flood control, and you can trigger support team call outs or recovery actions all directly from the workflows. And it's, yeah, the world's your oyster with that, as long as you can get a web request into Xmatters or an email.
Another question, actually, I just want to ask, so how quickly were you able to become comfortable with the use of Flow Designer, and how did you manage that?
So we started off by using the XMatters Learning Portal, I think, to have a look at the training on there. That gave us a good insight. I think one of the challenges that we've had in Telefonica is a lot of the tools are controlled at a group level. So we may not have the permissions that we want to do things. So we have to find ways around it. And so by using Flow Designer and our own custom integrations, our own custom code, it allows us to kind of be a bit clever. But what we did is we used the learning portal, we used the help pages, we used the custom access managers when we had questions that we couldn't find the answers to, which were very infrequently. And it's just practice. I mean, using non-production and just setting up a quick flow that you can trigger by an email alert and just get it to do something basic is, I think, the best way for me. Jump in feet first and figure it out when you're in the middle of it.
Great. You spoke about your next steps in terms of automation, and we had the question there as well around the monitoring tools, and you were starting the discussions there. But what do you see as the next challenges in terms of implementing that? And I saw you mention about the use of Agile and DevOps as ways of working. What do you see as your next challenges?
So I think from doing this historically in places like Walmart and Sky Bet, I think they're going to be organisational challenges. So, for example, we have quite a well-versed service management model that's been around for a while and does things fairly consistently and very, very well. When you start to put agile processes into that, where you want continuous integration, continuous delivery, it kind of has to change the whole ethos of that. And I think that will be our biggest challenge is how do we get people to buy into being able to make changes on the fly and remove some of that governance structure that's in place. And I think we do that by showing the value of the pipelines and the tools. We're not going to deploy to our entire estate in one deployment. We're going to deploy to one small region of our cloud, and we monitor it before we roll out to the other areas. We'll have integration testing built into our workflows for deployment so that we know that testing is being done as part of the release pipeline. So I think that will really, prove to them that we can do it. But I think that will be our biggest challenge is working with those teams to understand and see that benefit and giving up some control, I think.
And we have one final question, which is maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, but any tips on keeping so cool when you have an unexpected visitor while presenting on live webinars?
Oh, I know. So my little boy's just finished his, he had a webinar with school, actually. They don't have many, but it was at the same time as mine. So he wanted to come up to play the PlayStation. So yeah, quietly trying to shepherd him out the door with him not realising I'm presenting to all of you guys. So no tips, try and keep you cool and gently push away from the camera.
Smoother than a BBC political correspondent. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for your talk. One last question just come in. Do we have to? Yeah, we have time. Okay. So again, from Thomas, in a similar vein to his last question, is it possible to integrate with ticketing systems so your input is taken from a ticket or outputs to the ticket?
It is, yeah. So again, similar to before where we said about web requests. So we can send a web request and receive a web request in XMatters. So if we're using, for example, we've built previously an integration into ServiceNow. So when we send out communications, we could do that directly from ServiceNow. It would just trigger a flow in XMatters with all of the details from the incident record already in there. So you've got the incident number, the start time, the CI and service. So all of that detail can be used from your ticketing system and saves you time on needing major incident managers to enter that manually. So you can do that. It's one on our pipeline. We've got a replacement ITSM project that we're running at the moment, and hopefully we'll do that next year.
And of course, all of this, what you're doing is you're implementing small chunks at a time, improving the value, improving your capability, but without overwhelming your organization with the amount of change that's coming in. I'm assuming that in itself is reaping benefits. Yeah,
so obviously, company the size of O2, Telefonica, we've got changes going on left, right, and centre. So what we try to do is introduce a new feature to a small group of people. We test it and make sure it's working, and then once we're happy that we've done that for a couple of weeks, we'll roll it out to wider teams. I think that helps us have confidence that there's no bugs in there, that it's going to display correctly when we're sending the communications out. And it gives them a chance to feedback and make sure it's suitable for their teams before they all start to get it.
Well, great. Well, once again, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for your talk. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time and the effort that you've brought to this. I really enjoyed it.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
That's okay. That's okay. So before we close up shop, just a few quick reminders on things. Please join us on chat. We have on your screen at the moment, you will see several hashtags, several Slack channels that you're able to join. Please do join us, have a chat, have a conversation. Scott will be on there. There will be X Matters experts there available for you as well to have a little talk about any of these things. If there's anything on there that you want to get into more depth and into more conversation about, please feel free to reach out to any of the people within X Matters, contact us, let us know, and we'll see how we can help you. In the meantime, I'd just like to say one final thank you once again to Scott, and also a final thank you to everybody out there who has joined us today and has taken part. Thank you for being interactive. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Oh, a special thank you to those from Mexico and San Francisco. What time of day was it for you? Excellent job. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thanks all. Bye.